I feel what led me right from the very beginning is to keep the connection between Serena and myself alive, and not only keep it alive, but like actively cultivating the connection that we have, and caring for our love, not take it as granted, but like really being in service of love with her.
Action!
Welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. We are Kirsten,
Devdas,
Burkhard.
from the Akasha Yoga Academy. In today's tea chat, we explore the topic of the connection to the world.
So diving right into this external connection. Usually in yoga and meditation, we explore a lot of this inner connection, introspection, introception. We have a separate podcast episode on that exploration of the inner world. But today we explore the external connection to the world. And we're looking into topics of money, sex, and power.
yeah,
And many other juicy things. So we're curious to explore the wisdom of these fabulous yogis here, and are diving into the question to Devdas: what does this connection to the world mean to you?
wow, beautiful, beautiful question. I feel like, potentially in the yoga ideal, as the kind of individual egoic self dissolves, there's a profound love present still, and that love expresses itself as service. And you see that in so many yogis. I met this one yogi up in the Himalayas, and he was over his individual karma fully. He was in his bliss. But when he would talk about composting toilets, he would just get like, oh yes, like yes, it would just wake him up, like you could see the light shining through his heart, talking about composting toilets. Why? Not because he needs composting toilets in his life, but because there's this natural desire of the heart that wants to connect, that wants to serve, that wants to do something
For the community, bringing
community.
service, the karma yoga, seva, selfless service, to connect to the world in this loving way. And he knew for his rural community in the Himalayas there,
makes a difference.
compost toilets makes a big difference for hygiene.
Absolutely. And he had one right on the Ganga, so that, because many times the wastewater is just running to Ma Ganga. And
Into
he's
the
like,
rivers.
okay, let me set up an actual practical example. How is this applicable in daily life?
That's actually very interesting. Before starting this podcast, when we prepared, I didn't even think of that obvious point, that the outer connection for yogis is, of course, the action, the yoga of action, of selfless action, the karma yoga as it is presented in the Bhagavad Gita, the selfless service to contribute, to make a difference in other people's life. And as you termed it, also this loving kindness, this giving attitude of sharing the inner experience and bliss also with the people around. Wonderful. Lovely inspiration. Kirsten, outer connection for you. How do yoginis like you connect to the world?
I feel for me it is very much in motherhood. Like that is my recent incarnation, latest incarnation, motherhood. And I was surprised how deep the teachings of motherhood reach, and how profoundly spiritually transformative motherhood is. I had no idea about that. So I feel outer connection, engaging in the world, choosing to be in the world, and making this your path of being with God. My daughter comes to my mind as the strongest connection that helps me to be with God is currently. But there's so many other aspects, right? Like there is nature, there is ecology, there is community.
Yeah.
There's friendships.
Relationship.
There's work.
Yeah.
There's bills to pay. There is many connections into the world. There's the body. There's sexuality. There is countless connections. There's music
Creative expressions.
that can kind of be a strong tool to connect into one's divine nature. But like the first that comes to my mind, the currently I think most transformative is motherhood, is a child.
Very interesting. Maybe we stay directly in a way with the precursor of motherhood. Babies are usually not coming from immaculate conception, but there seems to be some process going on, which isn't in many ways a controversial topic, challenging, provocative field of life in general, and especially in the spiritual context. The question of sexuality is a very literally touchy topic with lots of pitfalls, controversies, and challenges in many ways, frequently coming from suppression on the ascetic paths of the celibacy, in the monkhood, in the path of the nun, in the monasteries, in the ashrams. Traditionally, in many religious lineages around the globe, we find this recommendation towards the celibate life, abstinence from sexuality. But still, procreation of humanity continues, and it can go along with a variety of misunderstandings, challenges, frustration, disappointment, and straight out abuse. So lots of catches, which were also in the last decades in the movement of feminism, exposed the countless problems which came from the patriarchic exploitation, and in the recent years in the Me Too movement, bringing the topic of sexual abuse, misuse, also not only into politics and corporate business, but also into the field of spirituality and yoga. So a strongly charged topic, and the question is, how can we cultivate that intimacy, that sensual connection with other human beings in a harmonious way with integrity? How can we cultivate and combine sexuality and spirituality? Devdas, what is your take on this challenging topic?
It's funny that I feel like that was something that I bow in my heart in gratitude to my teacher in India for his clarity on that topic, because I feel it was one of the misconceptions that was present in me that he kindly removed. And he was as ascetic a human being as you can possibly meet. He basically begged for his food for the majority of his life. He lived a level of austerity that I think almost nobody in this age can match. It's like unprecedented austerity. But he kind of hinted in a way, or pointed in a way, that my life would not be like that. And he even kind of talked one time. Sometimes he would just talk and you'd get the feeling he was talking directly to you. He wouldn't be even necessarily looking at you, but you would just have this interconnected feeling of like, wow, he's speaking to me right now. And he was talking one time about this man that had a daughter, and it was just like crystal clear in my mind, like one day I will have a daughter. It just absolutely clear. And it was different than my path at that time. That time I was kind of a wandering fellow, going place to place and living a very different style of life than family life. And I was kind of pondering it also in my heart, just in general, like, just like you were saying so beautifully, what's the difference? Family life, ascetic life, like, and is one better than the other? Is one worse than the other for somebody who's seeking spiritually? And then one time I was just sitting with my teacher in India, and he just looked at me straight in the eyes and he said, married or unmarried makes no difference. And already that was just like, that's a big pill to swallow, because like you said, it goes against kind of what a lot of spiritual traditions have been saying for a long time. And then he followed that up with another sentence: the rishis themselves, the greatest mystical seers of all time, they themselves were married. Just like the greatest spiritual adepts. Shiva was the Adi Yogi, the first yogi. Shiva taught that yoga to the rishis. The rishis themselves were married. It's just like, it's not a question of married or unmarried. It's a question of receptivity and dedication, and many elements, sincerity. Many elements are there that like factor in for people spiritually in their life, that do actually make a difference in the outcome potentially, right? Like, how sincere are you? How present are you in your search? What's the depth of your drive to engage in that activity? My teacher had a student who was a scientist, and he had come up with a solution for electricity that put his life in danger, basically. Like and so he came to India looking for spiritual answers, partially because he was fleeing from from being accosted by the world. And my teacher sent him to a cave in South India, and gave him some sadhana to do. And 1 year later, he wrote to my teacher, "Have failed in the attempt at yoga. Will return to science."
Tried, made my experiments in the cave, no electricity, go back to material world.
But it also felt like, in a funny way, like, let's just say that would be diametrically opposed to my own like way of expressing yoga in this life. It's like, because the Bhagavad Gita says inside of it, if you don't make it to the doorway into the universal, any attempt that you make will not go unnoticed. It's just like, whatever happens, no effort is lost. Whatever you put into your search will be repaid. And I feel like that's evident immediately. It's like in your sadhana. Like, is it producing fruit? It must be producing fruit. Like, if it wasn't producing fruit, you wouldn't be continuing to do it. So, there's kind of evidence. There's almost immediate evidence to the return. But I feel like in this modern world of, I think the modern world just places so much value on sexuality. It kind of looks at sexuality as being kind of the most important thing that could happen in your life. And even, sometimes I saw an interview with a famous sportsman the other day, kind of the most famous goal in the history of football or soccer, and he was the one that scored it. And the interviewer says to him, "Oh, you like, this is like the most magic thing. You really took it to the next level. You did something no one else can do." And then the interview says to him, "Was that better than sex?" And he says, "No."
My biggest success in life cannot compare to the good sex.
But it's kind of like, I feel like that's society's value about that, right? Like, society kind of, and advertising and all of the fashion and kind of all of the elements that like feed into that stream of belief are extremely strong. And they tell us, hey, this is the most important thing about you. Like, your sexual identity, your sexual experience, it is the most important thing in your life. And from the yogic standpoint, it just feels like it's not saying that there's anything bad with sexuality, but there are things that are as pleasurable or more pleasurable that are just a part of the yogic life. Like if you've discovered the bliss of who you are, sexuality will be or not be a beautiful part of that experience. Like there's nothing for or against it. And that's exactly what my teacher in India was saying, right? It's like married or unmarried makes no difference. Like look to your heart, look to your sincerity.
But I
and
have to
path.
say, like, depending, of course, where you are at, kind of, if
Yeah, of
you are
course.
in your, bliss realization, yes, it doesn't matter. Sexuality, no sexuality. Sexuality can be a beautiful part of life or not. But when this is not your constant state, at least for women, sexuality can be an extremely powerful tool to kind of, you know, get get close to bliss or to actually become bliss, because sexuality, like thinking now more of the period of orgasms, they are a strong, powerful sadhana, so to
Sure,
speak. Like
sure.
they clear your energies intensely. They like it can still your mind completely. So in this respect, sexuality can be like a very, very strong tool to connect into your divine nature. And if you would say sexuality, no sexuality, maybe sexuality is really an important part of sadhana.
Sure, just like that could be said of any particular sadhana,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like
right.
I could
That's
say,
right.
okay, Om sadhana, is that the most important sadhana? For someone, yes, that is the foundation of their sadhana. They can't live without it. They absolutely love it. It brings them tremendous bliss. For someone else, never practice it. Like, which one's right? Neither one. Like that just depends on you. And is sexuality a powerful sadhana? Yes, of course. It's one of the profound ways, and I think this is kind of like the ancient mystical tradition of India. The husband and the spouse are one. The husband and wife are one. Like if you're really in your partnership and you're dedicated to that partnership, there begins to feel like a sense of the unity that's true of the cosmos, right? It's like, in fact, you are also that way with all of life, but it doesn't always seem that way. I think that's what you were kind of alluding to also. And then in this experience, can that connection come stronger? Obviously, the answer to that is yes. And I feel like the more refined a relationship that you have, the more that element comes true. Like, one time I had vertigo, right? And I just kind of woke up in the middle of the night and I was spinning. And I just said to Kirsten, I'm spinning. I don't really understand what's happening. And I just went into the bathroom because I felt like I might need some support from that. And I'm sitting in the bathroom just spinning like crazy. And she later says to me, your spinning was so strong that I was spinning. It's like, okay, that's the kind of power that of psychic connection that can be present in partnership, right?
Very strong, yeah. I actually also have that with my partner Valerie. Even the sciatica issue, which I had over the last month, she also got it.
Right.
And then disappeared for me, it disappeared for her. And then the other day I was doing too much asana practice and doing too much forward folds, and it came back. For her, it also came back. So it was like not like in the beginning, I was like, yeah, it's just a coincidence and whatever, this and that. But it's like on and off, on and off.
Yeah.
And also left side. And so like same.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like those things come as a reminder, right? It's like they come as a reminder, just like kind of look at the experience as an experience of oneness and not as an experience of two. And then I feel like, how far can you take that? It's like there is no limit actually to how far that can be understood and how far that can be taken. Like my my teacher in India, he could speak to animals. He would go on his walk and he would come back and he would tell me all about the animals that he met and their stories and what they had told him. And somebody said to him, okay, you appear to be able to do that, but the rest of us cannot. Like, what would be the secret ingredient to make that a possibility for myself? And he said, love.
Yeah.
Like, when you love that animal 100%, of course you understand what they say. And I feel like that's so apparent in kind of pet relationships, right? Like, if you have a dog, do you know what the dog is feeling? Obviously, yes. Like, if they're hungry, when they want to play, when they like what they want and when they want it. Why? Because they're part of the family. You love them, you care for them.
Yeah, that's exactly the message which Nisargadatta Maharaj gives in this famous quote of "Love says I'm everything," where he speaks about this loving awareness of. He says, "I become the thing I look at."
Wow.
I experience the type of consciousness it has.
Wow.
I call this capacity love. This capacity to enter other beings with loving awareness, to kind of literally put myself in somebody else's shoes, to like with so much receptivity, sensitivity, as you described it also before, this full transparency of overcoming these apparent seeming boundaries of separation and slipping into another being and experience the being from inside.
Isn't that called samyama?
And that is what Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras describes at great length in chapter 3 as samyama, which Feuerstein translates as identifying absorption. So I'm absorbed in the other being, and I identify so deeply with it, or the other way around. I identify so deeply, I become the thing I look at, I get absorbed in it. So becoming one with the other being. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras describes it actually as practicing concentration, meditation, and samadhi together. So it's the last 3 of the 8 limbs of yoga, of the Ashtanga Yoga. Yama Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, internalization. And then the inner limbs are concentration, meditation, samadhi. And practicing those 3 inner limbs together is what Patanjali calls samyama, this becoming one with the thing.
Wow. Beautiful.
So in many ways also then seeing the divine in each other. So that's in a way a borderline when we talk today about external connection to the world, which apparently is an external thing, the other, the pet, the animal, the partner, as we talked about. But with another quote of Nisargadatta Maharaj, because frequently we get into conflict with others, struggle, communication, relation, and so on. And a disciple asked Nisargadatta how to deal with others. And Nisargadatta answered, there are no others.
And it's so true, because it's like the reflection of you that you experience in your working sexuality or in your destructive, violent sexuality, in your communication with others, which is loving and kind, supportive or inspiring, or which is destructive, violent, dull, broken. So I feel very much it is a reflection of what you cultivate. Like it is a reflection what's you. Like it's it's not about other really, of course also, but it is also so much just about your state that is speaking.
Wonderful. In a way, outer connection on the first view, but as you describe, it's actually just a reflection of our inner experience and the possibility to overcome that separation of me relating to somebody else, something else, instead via sensitivity, receptivity, transparency, overcoming separation, and recognizing the shared essence which resonates in all of us.
The more the inner field harmonizes, it speaks into the world, it reaches out, it is not stopping with the skin. Like the vibe. How can consciousness stop at the level of the skin, or where does it stop at my house door, or like it's something that's bigger than just like this walking, talking, physical body.
If we would step back, zoom out, and approach it with the so-called first principle thinking, what are the most basic ingredients of it, it does actually relate to the different understandings of what consciousness is. In material, Western, objectifying scientific worldview, consciousness is limited to the central nervous system. It's a brain function. And thereby it's an individualized thing. My mind, your mind. And it's kind of, I'm a conscious being, you're a conscious human being, and then we try to skin connect, communicate, interface in this or that way. But from a yogic perspective, the consciousness is actually not limited to the nervous system, but it's the universal essence of existence. It's a field, a sphere, the underlying background, which is not limited and confined just to my individual central nervous system. So then this connecting to the to the seemingly outer world is then just consciousness connecting to consciousness, but not a separate consciousness, but recognizing the universal consciousness in each other, which is one of the main significances how the Namaste greeting is described as the consciousness in me recognizing the consciousness in you, relating to each other. So in this way, not external communication from a yogic perspective might start on the kind of relative relation separation, but always has as its underlying profound understanding the intimate connectedness and unity, where it is actually no external communication, because there's nothing external to the field of consciousness.
Beautiful. I feel like if there's people out there listening who feel like more identified with the Western approach, like I'm an individual, nobody knows my thoughts, I'm a completely separate entity. What I usually recommend for people in that condition is like, okay, then go to a bank and observe your thoughts in the bank. Really carefully observe, what are you thinking? Go to a library, observe your thoughts again. Go to a temple or a place of prayer, observe your thoughts again. Like, your thoughts will be radically different in the bank than they will be in the temple. And that's not by choice. Like it's not like, okay, I'm not going to think bank thoughts even though I'm in the bank. I'm going to switch my non-bank thinking. It's like, no, because thought is a field and we're inside of that field, and that field is influencing us, whether we would like it to influence us or not. And I feel like that very much relates also to what we're talking about in the fact of Sangha. Like in every spiritual tradition from every corner of the world, they talk about surround yourself by people who are supportive energetically of your own journey. Why? Because that lifts you up. It's like you have your tough moments. Like, I don't want to practice yoga today. And then your friend's there and it's like, oh, come on, let's do it together. Like, we'll go for it. And it just kind of uplifts you.
Mutual upliftment, exactly. Like a shared space, which on a basic Western level could be called a collective subconscious, a shared field, a shared understanding, which of course goes together in a subculture also with terminology, slang, concepts, and shared experiences and shared inspiration, upliftment, counterbalancing in a family or community. One person has a bad day, the other helps to uplift, and lots of basic synergy on a just collective human level.
Yeah.
But in a sangha, in a spiritual community, it can be taken to much deeper levels because, as you describe it, it's an energetic field. It's a charge. It's a bit like we had before in when you had the vertigo story. Kirsten was feeling your vertigo. I had the sciatica back pain story. How it's radiating and how we are not as separated and isolated as our narrow-minded perspective would suggest. So cultivating the sensitivity to this profound interconnectedness in one-on-one, smaller community of family, and wider circles of sangha, subculture, etc. Maybe you can speak a bit to that field of family which you are cultivating with your daughter Serena, how in a way also children are growing up in that sphere, in the way microcosm of the family bubble. And then in the subculture of whatever, kindergarten, preschool, school. Also, I remember you speak regularly about your daughter Serena relating to the local Balinese culture, being inspired by all the ceremonies happening here. And that shared collective field which you are building in your family. As we know, many of our listeners are also directly engaged in family life. So maybe you can share some of that yogic connection which you cultivate in your spiritual family. From the basic level to intermediate and advanced levels of intention setting, of struggle when the ego of the child is developing, friction arising, how to deal with also practical challenges, daily life, schedules, necessities. And it's not always easy, but there is in a way also part of the growth in that parenting journey.
I feel what led me right from the very beginning is to keep the connection between Serena and myself alive, and not only keep it alive, but like actively cultivating the connection that we have, and caring for our love, not take it as granted, but like really being in service of love with her. And no matter what's happening, really, kind of, there's so many episodes and twists and turns in a child growing up. Like, what's for me the leading, my guide is keeping this connection, like holding on to our connection and offering connection, and rather than going into separation. There's so many moments that could also invite separation. But for me, like the most important guide, basically, that's in the relationship between our daughter and me, is cultivating love and connection, like making that really the core, basically, of our relationship, love and connection, and take it from there, whatever she needs, we need, to navigate our life with the captain being connection and love, basically. And that's, of course, very different forms, and oftentimes, of course, it's challenging. Like, children grow up, they develop, they have just their ups and downs they go through learning how to be in this world, and it has very strong expressions in times. And what was for me really important to understand is to rather than to judge her in that and have expectation of how she should be, like to offer connection, to offer love. Of course, love can also be, um, of course, limitations, restrictions, boundaries. Like currently, we feel that boundaries is really a way of showing love and cultivating our connection in a healthy way. But the connection and the love is always what's yeah, what's driving the ship
Mm.
of our family.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, you know, I mean, I feel like it's so apparent with the small ones that they just already are in the natural state of profound connectedness with all life. Profound, much more so than most adults. Like, I sometimes tell the story, it's a true story. I was playing with Serena when she was young, and we were just playing with giggling and laughing, and she was lying on her back. She was really that young, she couldn't really move around. And I was watching her eyes, and they were darting up into Chanchari Mudra, this mudra of like the eyeballs going toward the spiritual eye, and they were kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And she was laughing and giggling and playing and just having so much fun. And you know, her kind of eyebrows hadn't really formed yet, so I could see the line of the ridge of her brow. And when the eyes are closed, you can see the retina like moving. So I would be watching the retina go up toward the spiritual eye. And then I watched this moment where literally her retina passed her brow line. Like it passed past her brow, her retina. I was like, in an adult, what percentage of adults do you think can put their eyes so high that it passes their brow line? It's like, got to be close to zero. Like, but for a child, it's just like she's half in this world, half in the other world, and you constantly see that. It's just like, it's not that that's a kind of a thought. That's a lived experience of watching a child grow up. She's just in that state. And I feel like that, my own feeling is that's part of like the natural progression of the expression of life, and it's much more present on almost every level of life than we're possibly aware of. Like, a story that comes to mind is that my teacher in India had this dog, and they had a loving relationship like you've never seen. They were profoundly, 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 beautifully connected. And my teacher had been taught by one of his kind of friends, and maybe you could say also teacher, not to disturb the life of animals. Like if you see an animal do something that's not harming anybody or anything, just let them do what they're doing. Don't disturb their natural process. And so he used to sleep on one bed, and the dog used to sleep on the bed right next to him. He had a kind of a very small pillow and a very small kind of, not really like mattress, but almost like mattress, and my teacher the same. And my teacher went one night and he rolled out their beds and he put their pillows, and then he went to go get something, and he came back and Dharma the dog was sleeping on his bed. And he just looked at the situation and he lied down and he slept on Dharma's bed, on the dog's bed. And the next day he woke up, he'd had very persistent pain in his back for several weeks. He woke up the next day and it was gone. It was just like there had been some kind of exchange that had happened, and it had happened because he was that profoundly open. It's just like, okay, there's a dog sleeping in my bed. Well, that's okay. Like, I'll sleep in his bed. Not disrupting the natural intelligence and beauty and unfoldment of life. And I feel like with children that can be really challenging, just like you were saying, right? It's like there are moments where you're like, is that really the the natural flow of intelligence? But if you look deeper, and I think that's what you were saying also, right? Is like look for the point of connection, look for the point of support. And then yeah, it does come clear. Like many times I feel like with Serena, I see it so many times. You know, even in a day I feel like I have glimpses of it more than once, where it's just like she's expressing some intelligence that's as refined or even perhaps more refined than the intelligence that's expressing in myself. And you know, I think of the time when we were young, or when Serena was a bit younger, Kirsten and I were going out in the town, and we were kind of in a hurry, and we were like, okay, let's get this going. And then she was like, put on your helmet, and we were like the helmet's like back there, like I don't really want to put on my helmet, like let's just go. And she was like, put on your helmet, and she was like really was letting us have it. She was like almost in tears, like put on your helmet. And we were like, oh, okay. So we went back to the house, we got the helmets, we put on the helmets, we're going through town. Now for this story you have to understand that Ubud is a very particular place. The police only stand in certain places. Like they don't usually go around the town. They're kind of at a police stop. So if you avoid those police stops, you don't ever have any problem with that. So we're driving around through town with our helmets, and we're driving on all the way to avoid the police officers. And we drive right past some special government ceremony that happens to be happening only on that day. And there's a whole row of police officers out front looking for people without helmets. And it was just like, wow. Like, I feel like that's the same as what I was talking about in a way with my teacher in India. It's like, we could have just said, hey, you don't get to make decisions here. Like, we're going without our helmets. And if we had, we would have regretted it.
Yeah, I find it really, in a way, challenging to, on one hand, really understand her reasoning. Like, of course, so oftentimes it feels like, oh my God, you know, like, can we not do that easier and just not have this drama and just do that and that's it and have fun? But no, there needs to be a drama for something. And so oftentimes, but probably all the time, there is reason for that. Like there's an integrity in it. There's something that needs to be released or processed that we are in this moment not aware of, but kind of it's part of a child's life. They're kind of a bit more expressive and direct in processing what happens in their life, I feel, and then showing, and then also at the same time releasing and get rid of it. Yeah. And as parents to navigate this process, like not to suppress this to happen, to honor and to also teach the child to really listen and act according to what the inner connection suggests and shows. But on the other hand, also how to be functional, of course, in this world. And you cannot at every corner have your drama because something happened. Like you don't get anywhere. But maybe that's also okay, but somehow not very functional in this world at the way to work, going to school, trying to eat, whatnot, like the most simple things. So I find it a bit challenging to, on one hand, really honor her process and not cut and disturb her inner connectedness, but at the same time make us also in a way functional in this world. So I find that's a challenge to navigate, like to bring together the family intimacy, our processes with, of course, fitting into
but in
structures.
In a weird way, don't you think that the same is true, like with adults, basically, right? It's like if you just go by what people say, you're going to be profoundly misled all through your life.
That's right.
Like you have to be listening behind what people say. And it's kind of the same with the little ones also. It's like what they're talking about in that moment may not actually be what's really at the root of it. That's kind of what you're saying, right? It's like there's some processing happening, and now they're fussing over just a simple toy. And if you look at it, you're like, what? Like, come on, it's not that big of a deal. But you have to kind of be listening and be attuned to what's actually causing that fuss. What's the root of that thing, and really listening to the language of that thing. And then, like you said, and I feel like you do this so beautifully, like looking for the moment where the connection is possible, because I feel like that supports them in that exploration, right? Of like we're here together in this, and there's love and there's openness to receive whatever's happening right now, even if it's a strong happening, even if it's like yelling over something that seemingly doesn't have much significance. But there's this kind of background looking of like, okay, what's actually happening here? And I feel like that's in some ways even as much or more challenging for adults, right? It's like, I'm fussing over the remote control, and I want to have it, and you shouldn't have it, or whatever people fuss about in their relationships. It's like, well, it has nothing to do with that. It's some expression that's happening on a much deeper level. And then, do you have the sensitivity or the receptivity to listen behind what's actually happening? And that's you could say one of the kind of powers that begin to develop as a yogi, right? It's like not taking everything on the surface level, but just
Exactly.
like, okay, listening, like what's the intelligence, what's like, one of my teachers used to say, what's trying to happen? Like what's the real flow of energy in this situation that's trying to unfold? And being present with that, rather than, why are you fussing over this toy that's not that big of a deal?
And I feel the more I'm in my center, or not my center, but centered, the better I can hold space for this greater seeing, and for Serena. So I feel it is for a parent like making a profound difference, or at least in my life, when I'm thrown off center and when I'm not cultivating my connectedness, my inner connectedness, when I'm not kind of rooted in myself and God, then I read the superficial and react. I'm impulsive. And I feel a child is just such a good teacher in a way, because there's so much love. So a mistake in this way, there's so much more regret somehow coming with it, and so much more commitment to step up and come from a different place. Like there's so much more aspiration to come from the best place possible. So I feel it makes for me a huge difference. Like when I feel centered and Serena kind of throws a tantrum or whatever, like she's in her moments where just like nothing you can do really has an impact on a screaming, yelling, freaking out child. And when I'm centered, I'm fine with it and can hold loving space and offer connection in it. When I'm not centered, I wish it to be over. I cannot understand that a freaking t-shirt can make such a mess for hours and hours and ruin the whole rest of the evening.
But also that's like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I feel for a parent, it's a big difference. Where we're coming from.
Yeah. And also I feel like what you were just sharing right there, that's the intensity of the love. That is the exquisiteness of the love of the mother, Like they now did this scientific research that I love, that They used to think the placenta was a full barrier in between the cells of the mother and the cells of their child, and that there was no cellular exchange. There was only energetic and nutrient exchange, and that was governed over by the placenta. But at this time, they've now actually proven that there's exchange of cells between the body of the mother, and not just that the mother cell go to the child, but that the child cell go to the mother. It's a mutual exchange, both directions. And I feel like that very much describes what we've been talking about today. This profound interconnectedness of life is very, very, very profoundly present in this very special relationship between a mother and a child. And even one of my close friends, she had one of her sons, and she was cutting his nails when he was just a baby. And it's not that easy. That the fingers are so small, it's kind of like very hard to see. And she accidentally just drew a tiny drop of blood when she was cutting his nails. We were talking about it. By now, her children are grown. I think they're 17 or 18, coming into college. Talking about it recently, she goes, "Yeah, that's still like, I still regret that moment. That moment still hurts me." It's like, wow, like that is the love of a mother. Just like 17 years later, she remembers drawing one drop of blood from her child. It's like, it's profoundly beautiful. That
I remember as being in the first year of a baby can be really, really intensive, like especially if you breastfeed, and basically you don't get more than 2 hours in a stretch to sleep, and that over not only months, but then can drag over years. So the nervous system is impacted, and the physical body is impacted, and but there's such a clear call to service because of this tremendous love that's there between you and the child, that I felt so much that all service that I thought that I did before, and the love that I experienced before, was incomparable and was so self-motivated in a way. Having a child completely transformed my experience of what unconditional love is about, what unconditional service is about. I felt before my love and service came, I didn't know that before, but after having a child, I felt it came always with my conditions and my terms, like I'm serving, but like until I think it's enough, or it's like it goes until here. And with an actual child, these boundaries, they break, and it becomes actually something free. The flow of service and love is free from that limitation of ego. And in this way, I found motherhood, like right from the beginning, like a tremendous teacher, spiritual teacher, like a tremendous opportunity to put into action our yoga practice. So for me, motherhood is the greatest opportunity to actualize yoga. Like it's completely different than sitting in silent meditation retreats or whatever. Like I think that was all good preparation, but I feel kind of like can really use that, verify that, grow with that, and actualize it through motherhood. Like for me, motherhood, speaking about inner and outer connections, like being in the world, engaged in the world as a yogi, like that's where we came from, as outer connection, like being engaged in the world. Motherhood is like a full body engagement. Like Serena is still breastfeeding. She's 4 years old. Like we're still having such an engagement with each other in a way. Starting from that, but like of course going out into many other fields too. For me, motherhood is a tremendous opportunity of growing, actualizing, stepping up, and living like in every moment, not in the chosen moments, but in every moment, because it's so choiceless. Like it comes when it comes, like, and you cannot prepare for that. Like you just have to um, be in your center to receive and to hold space. So for me personally, being engaged in the world through motherhood is definitely big part, a big transformative part of my yoga journey, or of my being as yogini.
Mm.
Yeah, so in many ways, the journey of motherhood as the ultimate spiritual practice, as the real test for selflessness in our service, whereas attempts in spiritual organizations, ashrams, monasteries, where selfless service is in a way formalized as a practice of karma yoga, of some volunteering programs, etc., where there's of course tremendous learning and benefits and connection in that, but as you described, it's in some ways like a pale representation of the real deal, of the ultimate
I
challenge.
cannot speak for others. Like I'm sure for others, karma yoga seva is as powerful. But for me, maybe it has to do with womanhood, maybe not. But it has to be like for this person, like for this expression,
Mhm.
motherhood is highly transformative. Others might have the same experience
In
in
other ways.
service, in ashrams,
Mhm.
or
And that's also like, you know, where I think in yoga they have this concept called the bhav, and the bhav is like you can kind of treat the world and receive the world in different ways. And one of the very classic bhavs is mother of the world. And you know, I feel like we have examples, Mother Teresa, for example, you know, just caring for the sick and the dying as though they were her own children.
Exactly, as
with
though
this
exactly.
tremendous,
Mhm.
tremendous outpouring of love that was so touching that, you know, many, many, many years after her passing, she's still remembered in the hearts of so many beings as being a mother to the world.
Exactly.
And, you know, I feel like that concept of above, um, I mean, it can sound like a strange thing to say, but I feel like toward my teacher in India, I feel, yes, he was also a father, but also he had many elements also of being a mother. You know, he had very unconditional love. Like I remember a student of his had a problem with alcohol, and that student was with him almost every single night. He would come and sing with him almost every single night. For years, I always saw them together. Every time that I went, he was there. And then suddenly one time, it was festival time in India, where sometimes people get a little bit rowdy in the streets, and the man didn't show up. And I could just see on my teacher's face, like, how worried. You know, I just think he was constantly sending love and prayers to that man. And it's like that kind of unconditional outpouring of love that's just like the way that a mother would act towards her child, just like this intense love and concern and care for his safety and his well-being. Um, so I feel like that in some ways even goes beyond biology, right? Just like your bhav goes beyond your biology to some extent. Because there have been beings that have kind of been in the bhav of being a mother in the world who didn't happen to be in a mother's body, let's put it that way.
So that intention, that pure intention, that vibe, attitude of the bhav, which sets the tone and frames in a way our action, where it's not just a motivation but an aspiration, a profound and pure intention to be of service, to connect in a selfless way. Because in a way the selfless service is an ingredient to overcome the separation in connection, to overcome what we talked about in the beginning, the other, the isolation, the separation can be bridged by us dropping the guards and the barriers, stepping out of our way, stepping out of our comfort zone, overcoming this isolation with an intention of selflessness, of intimate, direct connection, and that reflection, seeing ourselves in the other, perceiving the consciousness which is the same in all beings, and in this way overcoming that isolation, separation, and getting beyond this external connection. I'm trying to somehow connect to somebody else, which will always be, in some ways, remain in separation on the physical world, but with this intention and sensitivity, receptivity that we talked about, we can, through transparency, connect in a very profound way and overcome separation. There are no others. Recommendations, tips, best practices. Kirsten, you already mentioned how being centered within yourself, how to be aligned, connected, helps you to weather those storms, to stay at peace and at ease. In some ways, in the most challenging moments when children are freaking out, where it's kind of like a complete drama and huge waves, to stay centered in such moments, breathing through that, tapping into that field of alignment and centeredness. Other experiences, tips, tricks that you can pass on to the people listening. What helps you to connect to others in an intimate way and feel that profound connection?
I feel it really starts within. Like it starts with cultivating your own connection and tending to your own connection, and starting with creating this this field of harmony within, and from there not much needs to be done. So I feel it is very much looking into your own stories and see how they can be freed, and how life can be cleared from whatever kind of traces, patterns are there. Kind of, if your choice is not to come from your patterned history, but to come from a place of freshness and from a place of depth and centeredness. I feel it's really, for me, working in progress, to look into patterns and to disidentify with them in various ways, like in, consciously meeting your family patterns, consciously meeting your work patterns, see them just acting in you. That's already a first step to see and to recognize.
That
And
would be like former external connections to parents, former partners, boss, working relationship, etc. Previously external conditions and connections, which we internalized in the process of living through them, and we in a way carry this
we
relation
found our
dynamic
way how
deal with
to
that.
answer that,
Yeah.
how we feel about that, what we do about the feelings that we feel about that,
Mhm.
how we protect ourselves, how we
Exactly. The
like
whole
all
conditioning which
those
carries on and
all those
resonates.
patterns that we collected in this lifetime and
Yeah.
maybe also in previous lifetimes. It's family patterns, relationship patterns, but even bigger, like not living in our home country as we all do, shows also a lot of our national karma or national patterns. And first let them come to light and see them for what they are and see them in action. And I feel the more seeing is happening, the more opportunity also of letting go is offered. And I personally, lately, I love to work with a wonderful body worker who helps me a lot. Like we were lately having a chat about what he does, and he says the body is storing all of your stories, and I just free your stories, and then they are free, and it's up to you if you let them go or if you take them back. And it's literally my experience that it's he's doing like very deep work in the body,
Deep tissue
deep
and release.
tissue work, trigger point work. And it's literally my experience walking out is like an energetic clearing, and it leads me each time into full bliss. So this is lately something that I really appreciate a lot, that I have such a resource, that I found this healer to work with, but also meditation, sitting with spiritual masters, yoga practice, just like this tending to the given and participating in what's here, really participating in what's here, I feel makes a big difference for me to come into a groundedness and centeredness, and that just helps me to let love shine through so much brighter and stronger and clear. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. How can you do that? I guess for everybody it's individual also, right? Like everybody finds their ways of doing their shadow work, working with psychologists, potentially with healers, maybe not needed, friendship with yourself. Um, but I feel very important is this process of seeing, like starting the process of seeing rather than blindly following, acting out. Um, I come from a very impulsive personality, and I feel I dropped a lot of that. And why? Because I start seeing, like it's seeing. The process of seeing is
Mhm.
what's doing the job.
So harmonizing the inner connection, and as we explored the previous external connections, relations, seeing those patterns, that conditioning within ourselves, and establishing that centeredness, and from there not just having an external relating to the world, to others, but to turn that seemingly external relating into a harmonious, almost internal relating of not seeing the other as other, but tuning in to that alignment.
Yeah, I feel like whatever you meet in life, meet in other people, meet in nature, meet in community, um, you probably feel there's something reoccurring,
Mhm.
and that is your inner state that
Exactly.
is showing on the outside. Why
Yeah.
am I all the time in trouble with shopkeepers? It's not every shopkeeper that's the problem.
Exactly, and that can be,
Um,
work related, whatever. I change job, but I get in similar patterns of friction with colleagues, the boss, whatever. Can be in relationship,
relationships.
new partners, similar problems, and whatever other patterns with other kind of groups of people or roles that we carry on. Then, of course, also like the conflicts which we had with parents, father-mother relationship, how that reflects in our relationship and repeats itself.
Yeah, and changing the attitude towards that. Why does that happen to me? Into why does that happen for me? Like, what's here for me to see?
Yeah, exactly.
What's here that wants to be seen? And with that, released,
Mm.
freed.
Devdas, any tips, tricks, or warnings about pitfalls, best practices?
I was feeling like when all of you were talking about samyama earlier, I was so excited in this Patanjali connection, and I feel
Becoming
like
one, connecting deeply, intimately.
there are very practical ways, like if people want to explore that, there's very practical ways to explore that actually. And I think people tend to think it's like, I'm going to walk down the street one day and bing, I'm see the unity of all life. And that is definitely a possibility. Sometimes you can just, uh, one of my teachers had a student that had the samyama experience happen in a police station. The unity of all life unfolding while she's sitting there uh, giving a testimony about some guy who stole someone's purse. And then she asked him about it, and he said, well, then just go back to the police station.
Make this your case.
But of course, it's not about the police station. But there are kind of very practical ways that you can play around with samyama. And one of the ones that I discovered recently that I just love, very powerful. Just sit somewhere with an object that you love. That can be a star or a flower or an animal or a human being or anything. And just put your hands together at your heart center and just really, really, really generate the feeling how much you love that what you're looking at. And really just go more and more and more deeply into it, like wow, until it's just kind of like overflowing in every cell of your body. The sense of love and presence is just like, kind of on almost a cellular level. And I feel like if you practice that, even just a very short amount of time, 1 or 2 minutes, regularly, you're definitely on your way towards samyama, right? You're on your way towards, wow, I love this thing so much that there's no sense that it's a thing and it's other than me. It's rather, we're here together. One of my teachers used to tell a funny story about samadhi that was about this boy came to an ashram in India, and his job was to tend to the buffaloes. They had water buffaloes in the ashram, and he asked his teacher for a spiritual practice, and his teacher said, your job is to love the buffaloes. Like, your job is to care for the buffaloes and love the buffaloes. And he was like, yeah, I kind of love the buffaloes, but then it was growing stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, his love for these buffaloes. And then eventually his teacher kind of put him in a room with one of the buffaloes that they were really meant to be actually living together in the same room. And the teacher came to him at one point, kept knocking on the door. How's everything going? Oh, I love the buffalo so much. I love the buffalo so much. Then the next day, knock, knock. How's everything going? Oh my gosh, like, it's just overwhelming. I love the buffalo so much. Next day, knock, 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 knock. No answer. Knock, 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 knock. No answer. He was the buffalo.
Became the buffalo.
Just
Exactly.
that was
Exactly.
that was the doorway. You know, all of us have different doorways, right? Some come through pranayama, some come through meditation, some come through having a child, some come through service. We talked about that. There's just so many potential different doorways in the world, but one very valid doorway is just the profoundness of the experience of your own love, and that just frees you of the concept of your separateness.
Mm. Mm. So becoming the buffalo, or becoming the thing as you gave as a practical practice to cultivate this loving awareness of something where our attention is naturally drawn towards, where we already have a deep connection, where it then comes in some ways easier. We build on that affection and deepen and make it more and more profound. And there's then a certain transparency, almost translucent ability to permeate, to pierce through this seeming separation and connect in a very profound, intimate level. Very inspiring. Next level of spiritual union. The
Buffalo.
The buffalo.
Buffalo awareness.
That's exactly the same as I was quoting Nisargadatta. I become the thing I look at.
Yeah.
I experience the type of consciousness it has. I feel it from inside. So I recommend our listeners to explore Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, chapter 3. Get a good translation, for example, by George Feuerstein, and go deeper not only in the study and listening and exploring on an intellectual level, but of course to practice these things with loving awareness, connecting to the children, to partners, to nature, which would be another topic for us to explore in future episodes, how to practice that loving awareness and absorption in nature. There's shortcuts like psychedelics, which open this door more suddenly and give that connection. There can be surprises at police stations and water buffaloes. So that profound spiritual connection is available in so many ways, of motherhood, of relationship, selfless service, silent meditation retreats. So many ways to connect and overcome separation, that it's not just two separate entities rubbing on each other, trying to somehow find shared surfaces, but to overcome that apparent separation and connect in the unity. So this is our sharing about connection for today. More and deeper explorations to follow soon. Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to also your exploration, your sharings. Please pass them on so we can connect in our community, celebrate this forum, these commons where we can learn from each other and show up for yourself and for each other in your family and community.
This was Wisdom in Motion with the Akasha family. Keep shining in the spirit of yoga.
Om.